Professor Veltar stood at the front of the lecture hall, his forearms gesturing gracefully as he welcomed the new students. The classroom was filled with beings from across the Galactic Federation. Insectoid vricks chittered softly in their seats, their compound eyes gleaming under the soft lights. Crystalline lumens refracted rainbow patterns across the walls. Aquatic depth dwellers sat in specialized water-filled chambers, their tentacles swaying gently. "Welcome to Primitive Species Combat Evolution," Veltar announced, his translator device converting his native tongue into the common language. "This semester, we will study a fascinating new member of our Federation. Humanity joined us only 2 years ago, after 50 years of observation." A Vrick student named Zixtal raised one of her 6 limbs. "Professor, why study humans? They are so new. What can they teach us?" Veltar's mouthparts formed what might have been a smile. "That is exactly what we will discover together." The door to the lecture hall opened, and a human walked in. He was shorter than most species in the room, with brown skin and black hair that showed streaks of gray. He wore a simple dark blue suit with a small Earth flag pin on his collar. "Students, this is Ambassador Chen Wei. He has brought historical databases from Earth to share with us." Chen Wei bowed slightly, a human gesture of respect. "Thank you, Professor. I am honored to be here." His voice was calm and warm. "I have uploaded humanity's military history to your tablets. Please, feel free to browse while I set up the presentation." The students activated their devices, curious but not particularly excited. They had studied dozens of primitive species before. Most had simple territorial disputes, perhaps a few wars over resources or mating rights. Nothing special. A lumen named Korseth, whose crystalline body sparkled with blue light, spoke up. "Ambassador, I see humans used metal blades in combat. How quaint. Did you stab each other?" Several students made sounds that translated as laughter. Chen Wei did not seem offended. "Yes, we did. For thousands of years, actually. Swords, spears, axes, arrows. We developed many variations." "But why so many?" asked a depth dweller named Scholes. "We had one conflict in our history. It lasted 3 weeks. We used simple projectile weapons, then negotiated peace. Why would you need thousands of different ways to fight?" Chen Wei was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that made the room fall silent. "Because we have been at war with someone, somewhere, continuously for approximately 3,400 of the last 3,500 years of our recorded history." The translator devices seemed to malfunction for a moment, repeating the numbers as if checking for errors. 3,400 years of continuous warfare. Zixtal's antennae vibrated with confusion. "That cannot be correct. Our species has had perhaps 5 major conflicts in 10,000 years of civilization." "The translation is accurate," Chen Wei confirmed. "Humanity has rarely experienced global peace. Even now, as we speak, there are small conflicts happening on Earth." Professor Velthar's forearms lowered slowly. In his 3 centuries of teaching, he had never encountered such a statistic. "Ambassador Chen, surely this is an exaggeration." "I wish it were, Professor." Chen Wei activated the main display. A holographic timeline of Earth appeared, stretching back thousands of years. Red dots marked conflicts. The timeline was almost entirely red. "We have been very good at one thing: fighting each other." A heavy silence filled the room. The students stared at the timeline, trying to comprehend what they were seeing. This small species, these newcomers to the Federation, had spent their entire existence in conflict. "Let me show you something," Chen Wei said. He pulled up images of ancient human warfare. Soldiers in metal armor, standing in tight formations. Men on horses carrying long lances. Siege engines hurling stones at castle walls. Korseth was fascinated despite himself. "These fortifications, They are designed specifically to withstand attack? For years of attack, if necessary, Chen Wei confirmed. Some sieges lasted decades. Humans inside the walls, humans outside trying to break in. Generation after generation, sometimes. But why? Scholes asked, genuinely confused. Why not negotiate? Why waste so much time and so many lives? Resources, territory, religion, political power. Sometimes revenge. Chen Wei listed the reasons calmly. Humans are tribal by nature. We form groups, and groups compete. For most of our history, we saw other groups as threats. The students were beginning to feel uncomfortable. This was not the lighthearted study of primitive warfare they had expected. This was something darker, something that hinted at a violent nature they had not anticipated. Perhaps we should move forward in the timeline, Professor Veltar suggested, hoping the humans had evolved past such barbarism. Chen Wei nodded. Of course, let me show you the 20th century. The display changed. Images of trenches filled with soldiers, mud, and death. Cities on fire. And then the moment that made every being in the room recoil in horror. Mushroom clouds rising over human cities. This is what we call World War I, Chen Wei explained, his voice still steady. 16 million dead. Then just 21 years later, World War II. 70 to 85 million dead. In that second war, we developed weapons that could destroy entire cities in seconds. Nuclear weapons. We used them twice. A VRIC student stood up abruptly, knocking his tablet to the floor. You used weapons of mass extinction against your own species, on your own planet? Yes. How many died in those two attacks? Approximately 200,000 within the first few months, many more from radiation afterward. Corset's crystalline body had turned a dark purple, a color that indicated fear or distress among lumens. This is monstrous. How did your species survive? How did you not destroy yourselves completely? Chen Wei's expression was difficult to read, but there was something like sadness in his eyes. We came very close. For decades, we had enough nuclear weapons to destroy all life on Earth several times over. We called it mutually assured destruction. If one side attacked, everyone would die. Professor Velthar's voice was barely above a whisper. And yet you built these weapons anyway? We did. The room erupted into shocked conversation. Students argued with each other, their translator devices struggling to keep up with the multiple languages. Some were calling for the course to be cancelled. Others wanted humans banned from the Federation. A few simply stared at the images of human warfare, trying to process what they were seeing. Professor Velthar raised all four arms, calling for silence. Students, please. This is disturbing, I agree. But we must remember that humans are now our allies. They have renounced such violence. They join the Federation in peace. Chen Wei did not contradict the professor, but he did not confirm it either. He simply stood there, waiting. Zixtal, who had been silent during the chaos, finally spoke. Her voice was quiet, but clear. Ambassador Chen, I have a question. Please, you showed us your past, but what about your present? What is Earth's military like now? Chen Wei smiled, but it was not a warm smile. That, I think, is a discussion for another day. For now, let us simply say that humans have learned many lessons from our violent history. We have learned to fight very, very efficiently. The class ended in stunned silence. As the students filed out, they cast nervous glances at the human ambassador. Professor Velthar approached Chen Wei, all four of his arms crossed in a gesture of deep concern. Ambassador, I am not sure we should continue this course. My students are traumatized. Chen Wei nodded understandingly. I know this is difficult, Professor, but you asked to learn about humanity. This is who we are. We are not proud of our history, but we do not hide from it either. Are we safe? Velthar asked suddenly. Is the Federation safe with humans in it? Chen Wei looked at the professor for a long moment. That depends on what you mean by safe. Safe from humans? Yes. We join the Federation because we want peace. But if something threatens the Federation, if something threatens those we have sworn to protect, he paused, then you will be very glad we are here. Outside the classroom, the alien students gathered in small groups, their conversations anxious and confused. They had joined a military history course, expecting academic interest. Instead, they had discovered that the newest members of their peaceful federation were the most violent species they had ever encountered. And somewhere in the back of their minds, a new thought was forming. If humans were this dangerous to each other, what would they be like against an actual enemy? 3 days had passed since the first lecture. During that time, 17 students had filed formal complaints about traumatic content. The university administration had received concerned messages from parents across 3 different star systems. Professor Velthar sat in his office, staring at a message from the dean suggesting the course be cancelled immediately. But Velthar was a scholar first and an administrator second. Something about the humans fascinated him, despite the horror of their history. He decided to give it one more session. The classroom was noticeably emptier when class resumed. Only 20 of the original 35 students remained. Those who stayed looked nervous, their seats positioned slightly farther from the podium than before. Chen Wei entered, carrying the same calm demeanor as before. "Thank you for returning," he said simply. "I know the last session was difficult." Difficult? Corset's crystalline body flickered with red light, indicating anger. "Ambassador, you showed us genocide, mass murder, your species weaponizing everything from biology to atomic particles. Some of my classmates have not slept since that lecture." Chen Wei nodded slowly. "I understand. Would it help if I provided context? If I explained not just what we did, but why we survived?" Professor Velthar gestured for him to continue. "Please, help us understand. Because right now, all I see is a species that should have destroyed itself centuries ago." "Then let me take you through our history more carefully," Chen Wei said. He activated the display, but this time the images were different. Maps of Earth, showing different civilizations. Humans evolved on a planet with limited resources, and many isolated populations. Unlike many of you, we did not have global communication until very recently. We developed in separate groups, each creating their own cultures, languages, and beliefs. He zoomed in on ancient Mesopotamia. Here, approximately 5,000 years ago, humans began forming the first complex civilizations, and almost immediately, we began fighting over land and water. "But surely you learned?" asked Scholes, the depth dweller. "Surely after a few conflicts, you developed peaceful solutions." Chen Wei's expression was patient. "We did, many times. But peace would last a generation, maybe 2, and then new conflicts would arise. You see, humans reproduce quickly and live relatively short lives. A lesson learned by one generation could be forgotten by the next." He showed them images of ancient warfare, not the shocking modern weapons, but the earlier, more primitive conflicts. "We developed formations, tactics, strategy. The Greeks created the phalanx. The Romans built legions. These were not just groups of fighters. They were organized, trained, disciplined military forces." Zixtal leaned forward, her antennae twitching with interest, despite her fear. "You created entire systems for warfare?" "We created entire civilizations around warfare," Chen Wei corrected. "Sparta trained every male citizen to be a soldier, from age 7. Rome conquered most of the known world through military superiority. The Mongols built the largest land empire in history, through cavalry tactics." "This is what I do not understand," Professor Velthar interrupted. "My species had conflicts, yes, but we solved them. We grew beyond them. Why did humans not?" Chen Wei was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, His voice was softer. Because we had no external threat to unite us. Most species in the Federation developed on worlds with dangerous predators or harsh environments. You learned to cooperate against external threats. Humans were the apex predator on Earth. The only thing that could threaten a group of humans was other humans. The room fell silent as the students absorbed this idea. They had never considered what it might be like to evolve without a natural enemy. Let me show you the medieval period, Shen Wei continued. The display showed castles, knights, and siege warfare. Humans built fortifications that could withstand years of assault. We developed siege engines, battering rams, trebuchets. We created specialized warriors in heavy armor. We made warfare into an art form. A new student named Krill, a small furred creature from the outer colonies, raised a paw tentatively. But at what cost? How many died? Millions, over the centuries. But you must understand something crucial about humans. Shen Wei looked at each student in turn. We do not see death in warfare the same way you do. For us, it has always been a reality. We honor those who die in battle. We build monuments to them. We tell stories about their courage. Death in combat is tragic, but it is also meaningful to us. Corsef's crystalline form pulsed with confusion. That is incomprehensible. Death is the ultimate failure. Why would you honor it? Because the alternative was slavery, conquest, or extinction, Shen Wei replied. When humans fight, it is often because we believe something is worth dying for. Family, freedom, homeland, ideas. He advanced the timeline to the age of exploration. Ships with sails, cannons, global trade routes. Here, we spread across the planet, and we brought warfare with us. Naval battles, colonial wars, conflicts over trade routes and resources. You fought on water too? Scholes asked, incredulous. Your species cannot naturally breathe water, yet you built vessels to fight on it? We fought everywhere. Land, sea, air, and eventually space. We weaponized every environment we entered. Shen Wei pulled up technical diagrams. By the industrial age, we had transformed warfare completely. Machine guns that could fire hundreds of rounds per minute. Artillery that could strike targets kilometers away. Tanks that were mobile fortresses. Aircraft that could bomb from the sky. And then came the world wars we discussed last time, Professor Velthar said, quietly. Yes, but what I did not explain was the strategy behind them. Let me show you something called trench warfare. The display showed complex networks of trenches, stretching for hundreds of kilometers. In World War I, humans dug into the earth and fought for years over strips of land measured in meters. Millions of soldiers lived in these trenches, in mud and filth, under constant bombardment. They stayed? Krill asked in disbelief. They did not retreat? Retreat was not an option. We developed something called the military chain of command. Soldiers follow orders, even orders that might lead to their deaths. Desertion was punished severely. The students were struggling to comprehend this level of organized violence. In their cultures, conflicts were brief, and individuals could always choose to withdraw. The idea of being forced to fight was alien to them. Shen Wei continued, sensing their confusion, but pressing on. We developed chemical weapons, poison gas that could kill thousands. We developed incendiary weapons to burn cities. We developed submarines to sink ships. We created weapons specifically designed to kill as many people as possible, as efficiently as possible. This is madness, Corset said flatly. Your species is insane. Perhaps, Shen Wei agreed, but we survived, and we learned. After World War II, we created international laws about warfare. We banned chemical weapons. We tried to limit nuclear proliferation. We established rules for how wars should be fought. Rules for war? Zixtal's translator device seemed to struggle with the concept. How can something so chaotic have rules? Because even in our darkest moments, humans recognized that unlimited warfare would destroy us. So we created conventions, rules about treating prisoners, rules about civilians, rules about what weapons are too terrible to use. Shoal spoke up, his voice bubbling through his water chamber. But did you follow these rules? Chen Wei's expression became somber. Not always. Humans are not perfect. We break our own rules. But the fact that we created them at all shows that we are trying to be better than our history. Professor Velthar stood up, his forearms stretched wide. Students, I think we need to take a break. This is a lot to process. But before anyone could move, Zixtal asked a question that everyone was thinking. Ambassador Chen, you have shown us your past. You say humans have changed, but I have heard rumors. Earth maintains a military fleet, training facilities, weapons research. Is this true? The room went completely silent. Every eye, lens, and sensory organ focused on the human ambassador. Chen Wei met their gazes without flinching. Yes, it is all true. But why? Korseth demanded. You joined a peaceful federation. We have no enemies. Why do you still prepare for war? Chen Wei's answer was simple and chilling. Because in 10,000 years of human history, we learned one lesson above all others. Peace is not the natural state of the universe. Peace must be defended, and those who forget how to fight will eventually be conquered by those who remember. He paused, then added, We hope we are wrong. We hope the Federation remains peaceful forever. But hoping is not the same as being prepared, and humans are always prepared. Professor Velthar felt a chill run through his body. He had invited these humans to teach a history course, but he was beginning to realize that he had introduced something dangerous into the peaceful Federation. Not dangerous because humans wanted to harm anyone, but dangerous because they understood violence in a way that no other species did. As the students left, they were quieter than before. They were beginning to understand that humanity was not just another member of the Federation. Humans were something different, something that had spent thousands of years perfected the art of war. And somewhere in the depths of space, unknown to the Federation, something else was stirring. Something that would test whether the Federation's peace could survive contact with real violence. Something that would make them grateful that humans had never forgotten how to fight. The news traveled fast through the Galactic Federation networks. Within a week, every major government knew about the human military history course. Within 2 weeks, the Federation Security Council had requested a full briefing. Chen Wei found himself standing before the most powerful beings in known space, explaining why humanity was not a threat. But the council wanted more than explanations. They wanted details. They wanted to understand exactly what humanity was capable of. That was how Colonel Maya Rodriguez came to the university. She was younger than Chen Wei, with sharp eyes and a confident stride. She wore a dark green uniform with various medals and insignia that meant nothing to the alien students. But something about the way she moved made them nervous. The course had changed dramatically. It was no longer an elective. The Federation Security Council had made it mandatory for all military officers. The classroom was now filled with high-ranking officials from across the Federation, all of them trying to understand these strange, violent newcomers. Good morning, Colonel Rodriguez said, her voice crisp and professional. Ambassador Chen has shown you what humans did. I am here to show you how we think. She activated the display, showing a simple tactical scenario. 2 forces facing each other on a battlefield. In traditional Federation military doctrine, how would you approach this situation? A Zentari admiral, his 4 arms folded across his chest, answered confidently. We would calculate the force ratio. If we have numerical superiority, we advance. If not, we retreat and call for reinforcements. Standard tactics. Predictable, Rodriguez said bluntly, and that is why you would lose. The admiral's skin flushed with anger. Excuse me? Humans learned centuries ago that superior numbers do not guarantee victory. Let me show you. She modified the scenario, making the opposing force much larger. In human military history, we have countless examples of smaller forces defeating larger ones. The Battle of Thermopylae, the Battle of Agincourt, the Battle of Rorke's Drift, the Six-Day War. She pulled up images of these battles, showing the force ratios. In some cases, the smaller force was outnumbered 10-1 or more. How? Zixtal asked, her antenna vibrating with confusion. How is this possible? Strategy, terrain, timing, morale, surprise, technology, leadership. There are dozens of factors that matter more than raw numbers. Rodriguez zoomed in on the Battle of Thermopylae. Here, 300 Spartan warriors held off an army of perhaps 100,000 for 3 days. They used a narrow pass where numbers did not matter. The enemy could only attack with a few soldiers at a time. But they lost eventually, pointed out Scholes. Yes, Rodriguez acknowledged, but the example holds. They lost the battle, but their strategy delayed the enemy for crucial time. But they bought time for their allies to prepare. They turned a defeat into a strategic victory. That is another human concept. Sometimes losing a battle is acceptable if it helps you win the war. Professor Velthar stood up, his voice troubled. Colonel, this is fascinating but disturbing. You are describing warfare as a complex art form, as something to be studied and perfected. Because it is, Rodriguez replied without hesitation. Humans have universities dedicated to military strategy. We have libraries full of tactical manuals. We study famous generals like Alexander, Napoleon, and Sun Tzu. We analyze their battles, learn from their mistakes, and improve our methods. She pulled up another scenario. Let me show you asymmetric warfare. This is when a weaker force fights a stronger one, using unconventional tactics. The display showed a simulation of guerrilla warfare. Small units striking supply lines, disappearing, then striking again elsewhere. The Vietnamese used these tactics against the French and later the Americans. The Afghans used them against the Soviets and others. Small, mobile units that refused to fight on your terms. A Lumen officer named Quinn spoke up, his crystalline body pulsing with interest despite his obvious discomfort. This seems dishonorable. Why not meet in open battle? Rodriguez looked at him with something like pity. Because honor does not win wars. Victory wins wars. A human general named Patton once said, "No poor soul ever won a war by dying for his country. He won it by making the other poor soul die for his country." The room fell silent at the brutal pragmatism of the quote. Let me show you combined arms tactics, Rodriguez continued. She displayed a complex battlefield with multiple unit types. Infantry, armor, artillery, air support, all working together. Each unit type covers the weaknesses of the others. Infantry identifies targets. Artillery destroys hardened positions. Armor breaks through enemy lines. Air support provides reconnaissance and strikes high-value targets. She ran a simulation, showing how the different units coordinated in real time. The alien officers watched in fascination as the human forces moved with a fluidity that seemed almost like a dance. Each unit knew its role. When one was threatened, others moved to support it. This requires enormous amounts of communication and training, observed the Centauri admiral grudgingly. Yes, humans spend years training for war. Our soldiers drill constantly. They practice until these movements become instinct. In battle, there is no time to think. You must react. Rodriguez pulled up training footage of human soldiers. The aliens watched as young humans ran obstacle courses, fired weapons, practiced medical procedures, and conducted mock battles. These humans trained as if their lives depended on it. Because their lives do depend on it, Rodriguez said, reading their expressions. In human military training, we have a saying, train hard, fight easy. Train easy, die hard. We push our soldiers to their limits in training, so that actual combat feels manageable. This seems cruel, said Krill, the small furred creature. You deliberately cause suffering? We cause temporary suffering to prevent permanent death, Rodriguez corrected. A soldier who has been pushed to exhaustion in training will not panic when exhausted in combat. A soldier who has practiced treating wounds will save lives under fire. Difficult training creates capable soldiers. She changed the display to show strategic planning. Now let me show you force multiplication. This is the concept of making your forces more effective through superior technology, tactics, or positioning. The simulation showed a small human fleet engaging a larger enemy force, but the human ships moved in ways the enemy did not expect. They used the gravity of nearby planets to slingshot around. They concentrated fire on single targets, destroying them quickly before moving to the next. They laid mines and traps. They transmitted false signals to confuse enemy sensors. In the simulation, the human fleet won, despite being outnumbered 3-1. The Zentari admiral was now leaning forward, studying the tactics intently. This is remarkable. You use the environment as a weapon. You deceive the enemy. You do not fight fairly. Fair fights are for sports, Rodriguez said. In war, you fight to win. You use every advantage. Humans learned this lesson in blood over thousands of years. She pulled up one final simulation. Let me show you something we call the OODA loop. Observe, orient, decide, act. The side that can complete this cycle faster will win. Human pilots train to make decisions in fractions of a second. Our commanders are taught to act while the enemy is still planning. The simulation showed a battle where the human forces constantly adapted, changing tactics every few minutes. The enemy could not keep up and was eventually defeated, despite having superior weapons. This is exhausting just to watch, Korseth admitted. How do your commanders maintain this pace? Training and experience. Humans have been doing this for millennia. It is in our blood now. Professor Velthar stood up, all four of his arms trembling slightly. Colonel Rodriguez, I need to be honest with you. This presentation is terrifying. You have just demonstrated that human military thinking is centuries ahead of anything in the Federation. You could conquer us if you wished. Rodriguez turned to face him directly. Professor, that is not our intention. Humans joined the Federation because we want peace. We are tired of war. But you have not forgotten how to wage it, the Zentari Admiral observed. No, we have not, and we never will. Rodriguez's expression was serious. Humans have a saying, if you want peace, prepare for war. A strong military prevents conflict. Weakness invites aggression. But there is no one to be aggressive toward, Scholes protested. The Federation has no enemies. Rodriguez looked at the depth dweller for a long moment. You had no enemies, past tense, but the universe is large, and you have explored only a small part of it. Humans learned long ago that peace is fragile. It only takes one aggressor to shatter it. You think something is out there? Zixtal asked quietly. You think we are in danger? I think that hope is not a strategy, Rodriguez replied. I hope the Federation remains peaceful, but I prepare for the possibility that it will not. The lecture ended, with the alien officers deep in thought. Many of them had served in the Federation military for decades, but it had been a ceremonial role, pretty ships for exploration, honor guards for diplomatic events. They had never truly considered what it would mean to fight a real war. Now they were beginning to understand, and what frightened them most was not that humans were violent. It was that humans were competent. Humanity had spent 10,000 years learning to fight, and they had become very, very good at it. After the other officers left, the Zentari Admiral approached Rodriguez. Colonel, I need to ask you something in private. Of course, Admiral. If the Federation faced a real military threat, would humanity help us? Rodriguez did not hesitate. Yes, we join the Federation in good faith. We will honor our commitments. even if it costs human lives? Even then, humans understand duty and sacrifice. If the Federation is threatened, we will fight. The Admiral was quiet for a moment. Then he said something unexpected. I hope you are right about an external threat existing, because after what I have seen, I fear what would happen if humans ever decided the Federation itself was the enemy. Rodriguez smiled, but it was not a comforting expression. Then I suggest you never give us a reason to think that way, Admiral. Humans are loyal allies, but we are terrible enemies. The Admiral left, his forearms wrapped around himself as if cold. Outside, night was falling on the university campus. The alien students gathered in small groups, discussing what they had learned. They had started this course thinking of humans as interesting newcomers. Now, they saw humans for what they truly were. Warriors hiding in the clothing of diplomats. And somewhere in the back of their minds, a fear was growing. What would happen if these warriors ever went back to war? The alert came 3 months after Colonel Rodriguez's lecture. At first, it seemed like a sensor malfunction. Federation Border Station Outpost 17 simply stopped transmitting. These things happened occasionally. Equipment failed, software glitched. Technical teams were dispatched to investigate. But then Outpost 18 went silent. Then 19. Then 20. The Federation Security Council convened an emergency session. They sent a scout fleet to investigate. Of the 12 ships that went, 1 returned. Its hull was scorched and breached in a dozen places. Half the crew was dead. The survivors told a story that no one wanted to believe. They had found the outposts, or what was left of them. Debris fields, wreckage, no survivors, and they had encountered the ones responsible. The ship's sensors had captured images before they fled. Massive vessels, organic in appearance, covered in what looked like armor plating. They moved with purpose and coordination. They had weapons that tore through shields as if they were paper. They had pursued the Federation scout ship for 3 hours, only breaking off when it crossed back into Federation space. The enemy ships had not communicated, had not responded to hails, had not shown any interest in diplomacy. They had simply attacked. The Federation had a name for this theoretical threat. They had studied the possibility of aggressive species in their expansion planning, but it had always been theoretical, academic, something that might happen someday, far in the future. They called them the Devourers. Now the Devourers were real, and the Federation was not ready. Within a week, 6 more outposts had fallen. The Federation mobilized its fleet, sending them to defend the border. The alien officers who had attended the human military course were suddenly in high demand. They had actually studied warfare beyond basic theory. The first major engagement happened near the colony world of Zephyr Prime. The Federation fleet consisted of 47 ships, a significant force by their standards. They had numerical superiority, superior technology, and the tactical advantage of defending a fixed position. They lasted 18 minutes. The Devourers attacked in a coordinated wave, their formation unlike anything in Federation tactical databases. They focused fire on single targets, destroying them quickly before moving to the next. They used the asteroid field nearby as cover, appearing and disappearing unpredictably. They seemed to anticipate every Federation maneuver. 39 Federation ships were destroyed. The remaining 8 retreated in chaos. Zephyr Prime was evacuated hastily, but thousands died in the panic. Professor Velthar watched the battle recordings with growing horror. The Federation fleet had done everything by the book. Standard defensive formation, calculated fire patterns, orderly retreat when overwhelmed. Everything they had learned in centuries of peaceful space travel. And it had been completely inadequate against an enemy that actually wanted to destroy them. The Security Council met again, this time with a sense of desperation. They had lost 40% of their fleet in 2 weeks. Colony worlds were being evacuated. Panic was spreading through the Federation. Species that had lived in peace for centuries were suddenly facing annihilation. The Zentari admiral, who had attended Rodriguez's lecture, stood up. His forearms were shaking, but his voice was steady. "We need to contact Earth. We need human help." The reaction was immediate and divided. Some council members agreed immediately. Others protested loudly. Humans were too new to the Federation, too violent, too dangerous. What if they used this opportunity to seize power? "What if they do?" the Admiral shouted, his composure finally breaking. "What if humans take control of the Federation? At least we will still exist. Better to be dominated by humans than exterminated by the Devourers." The vote was close, but fear won over pride. The Federation formally requested military assistance from Earth. The response came within hours. Not a message, but a fleet. Admiral James Okonkwo arrived with 30 human warships. They were smaller than Federation vessels, darker, more angular. They looked dangerous, even when standing still. Where Federation ships were designed for exploration and diplomacy, human ships were clearly built for one purpose only: war. The human fleet took position near Lumen Prime, one of the most important worlds in the Federation. Intelligence suggested the Devourers would attack there next. Back at the university, Chen Wei had reconvened his class. The original students were there, but they looked different now. They had volunteered for a special training program. They were being taught human military doctrine in an intensive course that ran 18 hours a day. Zixtal, the Vrick student, was learning about supply chain management and logistics. Korseth, the Lumen, was studying energy weapon optimization. Shoals, the Depth Dweller, was learning about submarine warfare tactics that could be adapted for space. They were exhausted. They were scared. But they were determined, because they had seen what happened when peaceful species met violent ones, and they would rather learn from the humans than die to the Devourers. Colonel Rodriguez addressed the trainees. "You are going to see things that will disturb you. Humans fight differently than you are used to. We accept casualties that you would consider catastrophic. We take risks that you would consider suicidal. And sometimes we sacrifice pieces to win the game." "What does that mean?" Krill asked nervously. "It means that in war, not everyone survives. Not every ship comes home. Human commanders are taught to think in terms of acceptable losses. We will spend lives to achieve objectives. It sounds cold, but it is necessary." The aliens looked at each other uneasily. The concept of acceptable losses was fundamentally opposed to everything they believed. Every life was precious. Every loss was a tragedy to be avoided. "You do not have the luxury of that belief anymore," Rodriguez said, reading their expressions. "The Devourers do not care about your feelings. They will not negotiate. They will not show mercy. They will destroy you unless you are willing to do whatever it takes to stop them." At Lumen Prime, the human fleet waited. Admiral Okonkwo stood on the bridge of his flagship, studying sensor data. His crew moved with quiet efficiency, each person knowing their role precisely. A young communications officer turned to him. "Admiral, the Federation fleet is requesting our tactical plans. Tell them to maintain standard defensive positions around the planet. We will handle the assault." "Sir, they are concerned we do not have enough ships. The Devourers typically attack with at least 3 times our numbers." Okonkwo smiled. "Then they will learn that numbers are not everything." The Devourers arrived exactly when human intelligence predicted they would. 73 massive ships, descending on Lumen Prime like a swarm. The Federation ships held their positions, but their crews were terrified. They had seen these ships destroy everything in their path. But this time, the Devourers were not facing standard Federation tactics. The human ships spread out in a formation that looked random to the Federation observers. They did not form a defensive line. Instead, they scattered, each ship taking an independent position. The Devourers seemed confused by this. They were used to enemies that fought in organized formations. They began their standard attack pattern, moving to envelope the defending fleet. That was when Admiral Okonkwo gave the order. Execute Operation Hornet's Nest. The human ships attacked. But they did not attack together. Each ship acted independently, striking at different targets, using different tactics. Some ships used the planet's gravity to slingshot around at high speeds. Others hid in the debris field from the previous battle. Two ships deliberately let themselves be chased, leading Devourer vessels into carefully positioned minefields. It was chaos. Beautiful, terrifying chaos. The Devourers tried to adapt, but every time they responded to one threat, another appeared. The human ships were everywhere and nowhere, striking and retreating, never staying still long enough to be targeted effectively. And when the Devourers tried to ignore the human ships and go for the planet, they found themselves taking fire from multiple directions. The humans had predicted this, and positioned themselves to make such an attack impossibly costly. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, 38 Devourer ships had been destroyed. Another 21 were damaged and retreating. The human fleet had lost 9 ships. 9 ships, nearly a third of their force. But they had won. The Federation observers were in shock. They had never seen anything like it. The human ships had fought with a ferocity and creativity that seemed almost reckless. Human crews had deliberately put themselves in danger to achieve objectives. One human ship had rammed a Devourer vessel when its weapons failed, buying time for other ships to escape. The Federation called it a tragedy. The humans called it a victory. Back at the university, the students watched the battle recordings in stunned silence. Professor Velthar paused the playback at the moment the human ship rammed the Devourer. "Does anyone understand what we just saw?" he asked quietly. Zixtal stood up, her voice shaky but clear. "We saw humans fight the way they have always fought, with everything they have, holding nothing back, accepting losses because the alternative is defeat." "They sacrificed those crews," Korseth said, his crystalline body pulsing with confused colors. "Those ships could have retreated." "No," Rodriguez said from the back of the room. Everyone turned to look at her. "Those ships could not have retreated, not without exposing the civilian evacuation transports behind them. The crews of those 9 ships knew what they were doing. They chose to hold the line." "But why?" Scholes asked desperately. "Why would they choose death?" "Because humans understand something you are still learning," Rodriguez replied. "Sometimes the only way to save what you love is to be willing to die for it." Those crews had families. They had dreams. They gave them up so that others could live. That is what warriors do. The room was silent, except for the sound of Krill quietly sobbing. Rodriguez's expression softened slightly. War is terrible. But humans have learned to find meaning in that terror. Those 9 ships will be remembered. Their crews will be honored. Their sacrifice will not be forgotten. And because of what they did, 30,000 civilians successfully evacuated from Lumen Prime. Professor Velthar looked at the battle recordings again, his forearms trembling. The Federation had thought humans were monsters for their violent history. Now he understood. Humans were not monsters. Humans were survivors. And they had just shown the Federation what it would take to survive the Devourers. The war had just begun, and the Federation was learning a hard lesson. Peace was a luxury that only existed because someone somewhere was willing to fight for it. And thank the stars, humans had never forgotten how. 6 months into the war, the tide had finally turned. The Federation was no longer retreating. Colony worlds that had been evacuated were being reclaimed. The Devourers were still dangerous, but they were no longer unstoppable. The reason was simple. The Federation had learned to fight. Commander Zixtal stood on the bridge of the Federation warship Unity, watching her tactical display with eyes that had learned to see battle differently. 6 months ago, she had been a university student studying military history as an academic curiosity. Now, she was a decorated officer commanding a mixed-species battle group. Enemy ships detected, her sensors officer reported. A depth dweller named Kurritz, who had also been in Chen Wei's original class. 12 Devourer vessels, approaching from coordinate 774. Zixtal did not panic. She did not consult the standard tactical database. Instead, she thought, what would humans do? All ships, formation Delta 9. We are going to split their attention. She activated the communication system. Korseth, take your squadron around the asteroid field. Make them think you are running. Shoals, position your ships in ambush pattern 3. When they chase Korseth, hit them from behind. It was a human tactic. Feint and ambush. Deception and aggression. 6 months ago, such a plan would have been unthinkable to Federation officers. Now it was standard procedure. The battle unfolded exactly as Zixtal predicted. The Devourers took the bait, pursuing Korseth's squadron. When they committed to the chase, Shoal's group emerged from hiding and struck at their engines. The enemy ships were trapped between two forces, their coordination broken. All ships, concentrate fire on their command vessel, Zixtal ordered. Cut off the head. Another human lesson, leadership mattered. Destroy the enemy's command structure, and the rest would falter. 15 minutes later, the Devourers were retreating. Not a single Federation ship had been lost. Zixtal allowed herself a moment of satisfaction before issuing orders for pursuit. Half a year ago, the Federation would have let them go, grateful to have survived. Now they knew better. An enemy that retreats today can attack tomorrow. Better to destroy them while you have the advantage. At the Galactic Federation Military Academy, Colonel Rodriguez addressed a room full of officers. The academy had changed dramatically in 6 months. Where once they taught exploration procedures and diplomatic protocols, they now taught warfare. The humans had shared everything: tactics, strategy, logistics, intelligence gathering, field medicine, even psychological warfare. You have done well, Rodriguez told them. 6 months ago, you were academics and explorers. Now, you are warriors. But do not forget, being a warrior is not about loving violence. It is about being capable of violence when necessary. Professor Velthar, who now served as the Federation Minister of Defense, stood beside her. It was a position he never wanted, but someone who understood humans needed to be in charge. His forearms gestured as he spoke. We owe humanity an enormous debt. You taught us not just how to fight, but why we must fight. Many of my people thought war was a failure of civilization. You showed us that sometimes civilization must be defended with force. In orbit around Earth, Admiral Okonkwo met with the Federation High Council via holographic transmission. The alien leaders looked different now, less relaxed, more focused. War had changed them. Admiral, the Federation wishes to launch a final offensive, the Council speaker announced. Our intelligence has located the Devourer home system. We want to strike at their heart. Okonkwo nodded slowly. A bold plan, but are you prepared for the cost? Attacking a home system is not like defending territory. The enemy will fight with everything they have. We understand, the Council speaker replied. We have learned from humanity. Sometimes you must take risks to achieve victory. Sometimes you must be willing to pay the price. The Admiral smiled sadly. Then let us plan this carefully. A failed attack could cost us everything. Over the next month, the largest military force in Federation history assembled. 150 Federation ships, 40 human vessels, and thousands of support craft. It was a fleet that 6 months ago would have been impossible to coordinate. Now, thanks to human training, it moved as a unified force. Commander Zixtal was there. Commander Korseth commanded the Energy Weapons Division. Commander Scholes led the Stealth Reconnaissance Group. All the students from that first military history class were now officers, applying the lessons they had learned. The attack on the Devourer home system began with a human strategy, overwhelming force at the decisive point. The Federation did not try to fight everywhere. They concentrated their entire fleet on a single objective: the orbital structures around the Devourer homeworld. The battle was massive and terrible. The Devourers fought with desperate fury, defending their home with everything they had. Ships on both sides were destroyed in dozens. The space around the planet became a graveyard of burning metal and debris. But the Federation had learned. When ships were damaged, they retreated and were immediately replaced by fresh vessels. When the Devourers tried to flank, Federation forces were already in position to counter. When the enemy launched suicide attacks, the Federation maintained formation discipline and focused fire. It was human doctrine, executed by alien warriors who had learned to think like humans thought. The turning point came when Korseth's squadron managed to destroy the Devourer command station. The crystalline Lumen, who 6 months ago could not understand violence, had just dealt a killing blow to an enemy stronghold. The Devourer fleet coordination collapsed, ships acting independently and making mistakes. Admiral Okonkwo, watching from his flagship, felt a moment of pride. These aliens had learned quickly. They had adapted. They had become dangerous. After 14 hours of continuous combat, the Devourer home fleet was broken. The orbital structures were destroyed. The surviving enemy ships scattered into deep space, running for their lives. The cost had been heavy. 43 Federation ships destroyed, 8 human vessels lost, thousands dead. It was the bloodiest single battle in Federation history. It was also a complete victory. On the bridge of the Unity, Zixtal stared at her tactical display, watching the enemy ships flee. Her crew was exhausted. 2 of her friends from the Academy had died in the battle, but they had won. She activated the communication system. All ships, this is Commander Zixtal. Cease fire. Let them run. They are no longer a threat. It was a human lesson too. Know when to stop. Victory did not require genocide. It required only that the enemy could no longer fight. The war ended not with a peace treaty, but with silence. The Devourers never contacted the Federation again. Their remaining ships disappeared into unknown space. Perhaps they would return someday, but for now, they were gone. The Federation had survived, but the Federation had also changed. 2 years after the war ended, Professor Velthar stood in front of a new class of students. The military history course was now required for all Federation citizens. They needed to remember. They needed to understand. Before humans joined the Federation, we thought we were civilized because we had eliminated war from our cultures, Velthar began. We thought violence was primitive, barbaric, something to be evolved beyond. He paused, letting his words sink in. The humans taught us something different. They taught us that civilization does not mean the absence of violence. It means having the capacity for violence, but choosing peace. It means being strong enough to defend what you believe in, but wise enough not to abuse that strength. On Earth, Ambassador Chen Wei was finally retiring. He had spent 3 years teaching aliens about human warfare. He had watched the Federation transform from a peaceful collective into a military power. He had seen thousands die, including humans he had personally trained. He sat in his garden, watching the sunset, when Colonel Rodriguez came to visit. "How do you feel?" she asked, sitting beside him. Chen Wei was quiet for a long time. Sad, proud, guilty. We changed them. The Federation will never be as innocent as it was. No, Rodriguez agreed. But they will survive. And in the end, is that not what matters? I suppose, Chen Wei said. But I remember when we first joined the Federation. We hoped that maybe, finally, we could leave warfare behind. We hoped the stars would be different than Earth. And they are different, Rodriguez replied, because we are here to defend them. At the military academy, a ceremony was being held. It was a simple structure, made of stone and metal, with names carved into its surface. The names of all who had died in the war with the Devourers, human and alien, side by side. At the top, an inscription in multiple languages. To those who taught us that peace must be earned, and those who learned that lesson in time. Never again unprepared, never again defenseless, never again alone. Commander Zixtal attended the ceremony with her former classmates. They wore their uniforms with both pride and sorrow. They had survived the war, but they had also lost their innocence. They could never again believe that the universe was inherently safe. But they had gained something too. They had gained the knowledge that they could defend themselves, that they were not helpless, that when danger came, they could fight back. "Do you regret it?" Korseth asked quietly, his crystalline body glowing softly in the evening light. Learning to fight? Becoming warriors? Zixtal thought about the question for a long time. She thought about her friends who had died. She thought about the enemy ships she had destroyed, each one containing living beings. She thought about the person she had been before the war, and the person she was now. No, she finally answered, because the alternative was extinction. The humans gave us a gift. Not the gift of peace, but the gift of being able to protect that peace. Back on Earth, Chen Wei finished his memoir. The last chapter was titled, "We Didn't Want to Be Warriors." In it, he wrote, "Humanity came to the stars hoping to leave our violent past behind. We wanted to be explorers, scientists, diplomats. We wanted to prove that we had evolved beyond warfare. But when the Federation needed us, we remembered what we had spent 10,000 years learning. We remembered how to fight. And we taught others, not because we wanted to spread violence, but because we could not bear to watch innocents die when we had the knowledge to save them. The galaxy is safer now, but it is also harder. The Federation learned that peace is not the natural state of the universe. Peace is what happens when good beings are willing and able to stand against those who would destroy it. We are warriors. We will always be warriors. And perhaps that is our gift to the galaxy, the willingness to bear that burden so others can live in peace." Years passed. The Federation continued to grow and explore. But they never forgot the lessons of the war. Every ship carried weapons. Every officer studied tactics. Every citizen understood that peace was precious because it was fragile. And when new species joined the Federation, they were no longer taught that violence was evil, a dangerous tool to be used only when necessary, but a tool that must be understood. The military history course continued, taught now by both humans and aliens. Professor Velthar, old now but still teaching, would tell each new class about the day humans first walked into his classroom, about how they had terrified him with their brutal history, about how that same brutal history had saved the Federation. "Humans taught us to be warriors," he would tell his students, "but more importantly, they taught us why warriors matter. Not to conquer, not to dominate, but to protect, to defend, to stand between the innocent and the darkness that seeks to consume them." In orbit around Earth, human warships continued their patrols. The Federation had its own military now, but humans maintained their own fleet. Old habits died hard. Because in a dangerous universe, it helped to have someone who remembered that peace was not guaranteed. It had to be earned, and humans had never forgotten how.